Good morning and welcome to the 2021 CCDEH Training Series Conference. My name is Jeff Lamore and I'm the Environmental Health Director for the County of Imperial and the current President of CCDEH. I'd like to thank Hedgegrowth Software for sponsoring this year's conference. Just to let the members know, last week's video has been posted, so you can find that under the video library. If you would like to sign up for more training sessions, please go to the events tab and you should be able to sign up under that section. You'll see it there in 1 second. There you go. You can see the events tab there and you can sign up under those sessions there. As well as there's the training sessions, training series from earlier this year in the spring that are also available for those who would like to obtain additional CEUs. Also, all members are invited to join us for the CCDEH annual meeting on Thursday, September 23rd. The Zoom invite will be, has been emailed to all members, and the agenda has been posted on our website, the ccdeh.org. I'd like to remind everyone we are still taking nominations for the Excellent Environmental Health Award. The deadline to get your nomination in is September 30th, and the Excellent Environmental Health session will be held on October 21st. In order to get your REHS certificate, you will need to be registered for the sessions, and after the session is over, you must log into your member account at the ccdeh.org website and complete the evaluation form for the specific session you attended. Again, in order to get your CEUs, you need to complete the evaluation. We are asking all session evaluations to be completed by November 5th, and certificates will be posted to your member account by November 24th. And with that, I'd like to introduce Christine Lane, Orange County Environmental Health Director and the Hazmat Committee Chair, who will introduce today's presenters. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Christine.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this training session. To recognize the education, experience, and accomplishments of our presenters and still reserve time for training and Q&A at the end, the complete information about our 4 presenters was sent in advance of this session. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Caroline Godkin was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom in August 2019 to serve as Deputy Secretary for Environmental Policy and Emergency Response. Prior to joining CalEPA, Caroline worked within the California Natural Resources Agency, first as a Deputy Director at CAL FIRE, and then as Deputy Secretary for Legislation. She worked on policy areas related to wildfire and forestry, water and water infrastructure management, land preservation, endangered species, oil and gas regulation, park bond measures, and climate adaptation. Linda Lai was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom in November 2019 to serve as Deputy Secretary for Law Enforcement and General Counsel at the California Environmental Protection Agency. Prior to her appointment, she served for 2 years as the Superior Court Judge in Contra Costa County. Before entering government service, she was a senior staff attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union Foundation of Northern California, where she spearheaded litigation on issues that included surveillance, open government, voting rights, and lethal injection. Jason Boetzer is the Assistant Secretary for Local Program Coordination and Emergency Response. He has more than 20 years of experience working in the environmental health field and 13 years as a manager, director, implementing and leading environmental and public health programs at the state and local levels. In his current position, he oversees the state's implementation of the Unified Program and its 81 certified local agencies. The program ensures consistency in the administration, permitting, and enforcement of regulatory standards for the management of hazardous materials, hazardous waste, underground storage tanks, and accidental release. He is also responsible for coordinating CalEPA's response to statewide emergencies. Most recently, Jason served as the Emergency Response and Refinery Safety Program Manager for CalEPA. And last but not least, Marjorie Terrell is the CUPA Program Supervisor for San Mateo County and the current CUPA Forum Board Chair and Conference Committee Co-Chair. She has nearly 20 years of experience in environmental regulation with over 15 years of experience in the CUPA program. She began working for San Mateo County as a field inspector for 10 years, implementing all CUPA programs, and was the county's enforcement and waste tire specialist for 8 years. Thank you, everyone, and I'm going to turn it now over to CalEPA for the presentation.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you, Christine, for that introduction, and to Jeff for the invitation to be here today. I truly appreciate being here. Again, my name is Godkin, and I am the Deputy Secretary for Environmental Policy and Emergency Response. So I may have spoken with some of you before, but just a quick overview of my role. I provide policy support to the Secretary in the areas of covered by DTSC and CalRecycle, as well as the Unified Program and Emergency Response within the agency. So as I was putting together this presentation, I was reflecting on, I think the last time I spoke to this group was when we were up in SCORE in 2019, and I had just assumed the position at CalEPA. And I wanted to recognize, just for everybody who's on this presentation today, who's really been at the sharp end of all of the difficult times that we've been through in California, and express my personal gratitude both for everything that you've been through and everything that you've done on a day-to-day basis to protect Californians, but also for the ongoing partnership, as is reflected in us joining us today. We are so grateful for all of our local partners, particularly as we've gone through these most difficult times since 2019. So I just wanted to start off by reflecting on just what we've achieved since that last time in 2019. When I was appointed, the Secretary reorganized how reporting responsibilities within the Office of the Secretary, and actually moved for the first time the local programs and emergency response under a policy deputy. So that came under my purview. And so his focus was really bolstering the support for the Unified Program and the Unified Program Evaluation Team, as well as continued support for our local partners. Over the last 2 years, it took slightly longer than we'd planned. We have transferred the CalEPA and the Hazardous Waste Business Plan programs from CalOES to CalEPA, and that was effective in this year's budget. And we are working on the smooth transition and working with our partners over at OES to make sure that is a smooth transition. And as I don't need to tell anyone on this discussion, the emergencies are now ongoing year-round, multifaceted. As CalEPA, we work on debris missions year-round, both with DTSC and also with CalRecycle. So really strengthening our response capabilities and making sure that we are the best partner that we can be, both for the Office of Emergency Services, but also for you, our local partners, in making that first critical step to help Californians recover from disasters. And then the big area I want to talk to you is DTSC reform and what we've achieved since 2019 when I came on, but actually over the last 10 years. So many of you will be aware that DTSC reform package was passed in the budget in June, and it was contained in SB 158. It's 150 pages of trailer bills, so unless you're really interested, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading it. But to give a summary, it does have 3 main components. And the first is the creation of a 5-member board of environmental safety that will provide strategic guidance to the department. It's a slightly different model than the Air Resources Board or the State Water Resources Control Board within CalEPA, in that it's actually not directing the day-to-day activities. What it is doing is providing transparency and strategic guidance to the department. It also has fee setting capability, which was a huge and critical component of it. And alongside that, we actually updated the fees for DTSC to put DTSC on a sound fiscal footing going forward. Initially, there will be some investments in core programs identified by DTSC as gaps. But critically, what it does is it updates the fee structure that was first put in place in 1998. And it actually gives DTSC the resources it needs to do its job, both from an enforcement perspective, from a programmatic perspective, and critically supporting our local programs as well. And then the third component was the programmatic reform, including the creation of a new statewide hazardous waste management plan, and work will beginning on that soon. And then the final piece, which is one of the lifetime achievements, was over $800 million of investments for brownfield site cleanup, local assistance grants, and ex-site cleanup. So there will be over $500 million that will be available both to investigate the sites, contaminated sites, and to continue work on the cleanup, to provide grants for locals who also want to do this, and then over $322 million to continue with the cleanup of the ex-site site. It's estimated over 150,000 to 200,000 abandoned orphan sites around the state. So this really is a down payment on the activities of starting to get those sites cleaned up. So what we're doing next, the board will be in place by January of 2022. There are 3 gubernatorial appointments that will be subject to Senate confirmation that we're currently working on. We actually are very fortunate that we had our first appointment made by the Senate in August, Georgette Gomez from San Diego, who is extremely experienced both in air and environmental justice, and we're thrilled to have her join the board. And then there'll be an appointment made by the State Assembly. We are hiring, obviously, these transformational expenditures require personnel to support. And so we have a complex hiring plan to make sure that DTSC is fully staffed to deliver on what we have been provided in the budget. And then we'll be looking, going through the annual budget process for positions in the out years. And so then looking forward to the coming year, I'm very cognizant that making plans in 2021 feels possibly more foolish than making plans in 2020 was. But this is what we are going to continue to keep working on. So obviously the implementation of DTSC reform that I just spoke to, and the continued integration of the CalEPA and the hazardous waste business plans within CalEPA. As I mentioned, that transition is already underway, and we're working with our partners at CalEPA's, but making sure that that transition goes smoothly and that we are providing support to our local partners. We do have a number of key initiatives on the circular economy, and also the implementation of SB 1383, the organics mandate, and then again the continued improvements to CalEPA emergency response capabilities to make sure that we are treating the emergencies as the year-round phenomenon that they are, and making sure that we're taking care of our people, making sure that we're appropriate resourced, but as well as being able to protect all of the state and federal investments that come to California through emergency declarations. So those, that's a very quick overview of what we've achieved today and what we're looking forward to in the coming year. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Linda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us this morning. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here and to be speaking to you. So we really are very grateful for the opportunity and looking forward to increased collaborations. A little bit about my role here at CalEPA. The legislature, as I'm sure you're aware, has created by statute a role for CalEPA, and my position in particular, to ensure consistent, effective, and coordinated enforcement, not just amongst CalEPA's boards, departments, and offices, but also the other agencies that implement laws within our jurisdiction. And so coordination is a key part of the legislature's mandate for CalEPA. It's also a key part of Secretary Blumenfeld's vision for what a robust, forward-leaning enforcement strategy looks like in a complex state like California. So one thing I just wanted to acknowledge at the outset are common obstacles to enforcement. I'm sure there are many more, but I think there are at least two that we all encounter in our daily lives. One is limited resources, and another is just the reality of political will. It can be difficult to enforce. I think many of us want to ensure compliance assistant, and provide resources to the regulated community. But going from compliance assistant to actual enforcement, issuing notices of violations, enforcing penalties, taking the next step can be a challenge. But I wanted to talk a little bit today about how Secretary Blumenfeld's vision for a robust and effective forward-leaning enforcement strategy can help us work through some of these two key common obstacles that arise in enforcement. So in January of February of 2020, Secretary Blumenfeld issued an enforcement memo, and it set forth his vision for enforcement at CalEPA. And I think I just want to start a little bit about why robust enforcement matters. Obviously, you know, I'm preaching to the choir on some of this, but I think it's worth a few moments. We still face persistent environmental challenges, and I think everything that we're facing on the endless back-to-back emergencies, whether it's drought or wildfires, and the endless cycle of those two, among other things, really for the climate crisis really helps us put enforcement will play a key role. We have to think about climate resilience, adaptation strategy, but also enforcing the robust environmental laws that we already have on the books. As we've seen over the many years, California traditionally leads the way, and it needs to continue leading the way. That's how we'll bring the rest of the country along, the rest of the world along. And so enforcement is key at the state level, but also with our local partners. And together, we need to continue leading the way. Enforcement matters because it serves an important deterrence effect. And in terms of the political will issues that I think we often encounter, we work with the regulated community. They're our partners, but robust enforcement sends an important deterrent effect, and it also sends a strong message that we need to have a level playing field. We need to ensure that the people who do not comply obviously do not gain an unfair competitive advantage over our regulated our partners in the regulated community who are doing the right thing, protecting public health and the environment. And I think that sort of notion of how enforcement actually helps the regulated community is an important part of the dialogue on and engagement with the sort of political factors that are always at play, and shifting from a mindset of pure compliance assistance is a key element. Enforcement is also a key element because it helps our partners in the regulated community do the right thing, and it makes it competitively, economically advantageous for us to work together in this fashion. So in terms of Secretary Blumenfeld's enforcement memo set forth a number of different strategies, and in some senses, I think they boil down to three key points. One is the strategic deployment of resources. Again, I recognize that everyone is always struggling with limited resources. I frequently spoken with Caroline about how we all wish we could clone Jason Boetzer and his team. Unfortunately, the technology is not quite there yet. And until we can clone, our directors of environmental health, we have to act smart with our limited resources. And one of the key ways we can do that is to be more data-driven. How can we use data to target our enforcement resources? We have tools. Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment has CalEnviroScreen. This is groundbreaking. We're working actually with US EPA now to collaborate on CalEnviroScreen and an EPA screening tool to see how we can integrate some of the algorithms that we have in CalEnviroScreen in terms of ranking census tracts, and how that can be a model nationwide for US EPA. Again, I think this is another example of California leading the way and how we can set a model and also help other states and the country use data to help us identify how to target our enforcement resources on the most overburdened communities. In addition, thinking big picture and taking a step back, how can we use data to understand which communities suffer from heavier pollution burdens? How can we use data to understand and just take a step back and think about what our compliance rates look like? If we might just be used to doing certain inspections, we have a limited number of inspections we can do in a given year. If there's some core program, to the extent that we have discretion, if there are some core program areas, core enforcement programs where the compliance rates are higher than others, then maybe we should be shifting our inspection resources to those where we are seeing the repeat violations, where we are seeing higher out of compliance rates. And sometimes it can be a struggle to actually compile or compile those compliance rates, but taking a step back, taking the time to look at the data and map out the compliance rates across different program areas can help us think about how to deploy our resources more effectively. Are we really focusing them on the areas where the burdens are higher, the violation rates are higher? And then also thinking big picture about what does success look like and how can we measure it? I think as we're putting together strategic plans, and I know Jason will be touching on that shortly, as we're thinking big picture and strategically, what are the outcomes in the world that we want to see? It's, I think, very common and natural to think about the inputs like, well, okay, we'll do X number of inspections per year. Those are inputs and those are important tactics in order to get us to the big picture. But taking a step back, what are we trying to achieve? I think in the environmental context, we're trying to reduce pollution burdens. We're trying to improve public health outcomes. We're trying to achieve better, reduce pollution burdens in overburdened communities and across the board. So what are those big picture outcomes that we want to achieve? Can we measure them? And then how do we sort of, from there, how do we figure out what tactics and strategies we should be applying? All of that, it requires us to take a step back. And it sometimes, I can understand, can be a little bit daunting and feel like, oh, I need to get through my immediate obligations. And it can feel like a distraction to ask these big picture questions or to try to gather the data to measure some of these really complex issues. But it can help us with that sort of short-term investment. It can help us be more strategic about deploying our limited resources. I think the next key element of CalEPA's enforcement strategy is really increased coordination. And I think, little needs to be said here. I think we're all believers in how increased coordination, across program areas, across state, federal, local, tribal agencies, also internally within our organizations between permitting, enforcement, and policy. This, again, it seems initially at the outset sometimes like increased transaction costs, but it really yields a bigger bang for the buck. And finally, I think the last piece that I wanted to talk about as a core and central element of CalEPA's enforcement strategy is equity and enforcement. What we want to focus on, again, and I was mentioning earlier in terms of strategic plan thinking and how we strategically set our big picture, big vision goals, is thinking in terms of outcomes and not just inputs. What is the world that we want to see? What does that look like? And then what inputs do we need in order to get there? One helpful visual illustration of the difference between outcomes and inputs, I think, is in this image. When we think about deploying our resources or what we can do as regulators in order to enhance enforcement, enhance compliance rates, improve public health outcomes, is we can think about, okay, well, let's do the same. If we think about equity, often I think we're driven by a notion of equality, which is important, and we want to treat all the neighborhoods the same. So but how does that tie into the outcomes in the world that we want to see? if we do the same number of inspections across all of the census tracts in the state of California, then that would be a sort of an equal input approach. But that's not necessarily going to yield the outcomes that we want to see, because we're not starting at the same place across those different neighborhoods. So if we take an equality approach, everyone gets the same boost in order to look over that fence and get a view onto the baseball game. But if we take an equity approach and we focus on the outcomes that we want all of those little kids to be able to see the baseball game. We need to look at the playing field where everyone is starting from, and recognize that maybe the little kid, the littlest kid, the shortest kid needs a little bit more of a boost. So if we think of that in terms of the first slide that I was talking about, in terms of strategic deployment of resources, using data, looking at how can we strategically target our resources. We have to understand what the playing field looks like and how we can be instrumental in leveling it. And that kind of equity-driven, outcome-focused approach is a really key element of CalEPA's enforcement strategy. And so just sort of tying those first and third piece, all of those three pieces together, I think we have tools already, such as CalEnviroScreen. How can we target our enforcement resources? We're very excited to be launching a new version of CalEnviroScreen later this year, 4.0. And so using tools like that can help us strategically deploy our resources, achieve equitable outcomes, working collaboratively together. And hoping to bring, have California continue to lead the way on not just compliance assistance, but also a robust enforcement strategy that levels the playing field, will yield better health outcomes. It's good for the regulated community, achieves fairness, both for the regulated community and California's public, which of course we're all here to serve. Thank you so much.
Thanks, excuse me. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Caroline. And thanks again to CCDEH for inviting us here today, and to just really always highlight the importance of our continued collaboration and relationships built over the years, and our commitment to continue that moving forward. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. So I want to take a kind of a step back, and the unified program, SB 1082, was signed into law 28 years ago. And, it's a damn good environmental and public health program. I'm just going to be frank about that. I've worked in a lot of other environmental health programs, all good, and, obviously have bias towards the unified program. But in all honesty, I think we can all, take a step back and look at the success of the program has been set up with the governance structure, and most importantly, the relationships built upon between the local, state, and federal government, in implementing the 6 different hazardous material programs. And I know Marjorie's going to talk a little bit more of what that structure looks like, but, over the last, 28 years, we've come a long way, and it's our commitment to continue the success of the program moving forward. And the importance of that is to continue to have cohesive collaboration amongst all the stakeholders, and CCDEH, fire chiefs, all of our community organization, NGOs, et cetera, are important players as part of that. I also, on top of the slide, one CalEPA, and that's not just between, I want to highlight that because that's our secretary's mission is, a lot of times, the state agencies have operated in silos. And, our goal at the state is there are no silos. We're here for collaboration and coordination, not only at the state level, but also at the local level. So that interagency coordination is critical to the program's success, has been, and moving forward. Also, the consistent inspections and enforcement, thinking back, there was over 1,100, I believe, different agencies implementing the different aspects, the 6 elements of the unified program. And now we have 81 CUPAs and they're participating agencies implementing these programs. And that's critical. That's not only is that critical to the program success, it's critical for the regulated community. And we're always striving for that consistency from jurisdiction, local to state level. And then obviously consolidate program activities. These are the key points of SB 1082 and continue to lead us as we move forward. Linda mentioned the strategic plan, and I want to take a step back here too. Is this was discussed in our leadership summit that some of you just were participated in our CUPA conference in 2020 with our undersecretary, and really, discussions led to, is our current strategic plan meeting our current, goals? Is it, and our current vision and mission statements, are they, pointing us in the right direction? And also having, those outcomes, those key performance indicators, strategies, and outcomes, and leading us to where we need to go. And so we've embarked over the last year in updating the strategic plan, and thanks to all of you that have allowed staff to participate, along with our state and federal agencies, to come up with a draft plan. And our vision, kind of to what Linda talked about, healthy people, healthy environment, and healthy business to build healthy communities for all Californians. I know that's broad in scope, but that's our purpose and our vision as we move forward. And then with our mission is that consistent and equitably implement the unified program to protect and enhance public health and the environment. And both of those statements really set the course for us moving forward. And with this, we are committed to ensure that the strategic plan is carried out. We have the governance structure within UPAG and within the partnership of the CUPA Forum Board and the state agencies to ensure that we meet the strategies, the objectives, and the KPIs. The plan was expected to be finalized this month. I think realistically, we're looking at probably November, December of this year for finalization of plan with full implementation January 1st. But we'll be coordinating, communicating that out to all of the stakeholders. Looking at our strategic goals, some of these are similar to the previous strategic plan, and some of these are a little bit different. And I think, you can see them on the screen, but as you look at how we can best use our technology to achieve strategies, Cheryl, prior to this call, mentioned there's 17 new directors and interim directors out there. We also have new staff at the state level and local level. What can we do to attract and retain staff? That's important for that consistency aspect. Also looking at, Linda just talked about ensuring consistent, comprehensive, and equitable enforcement, ensuring that we have solid strategies moving forward, educating and influencing stakeholders. I think, really this is looking at engaging our community partners and understanding their wants, needs within the individual communities, but also explaining to them our programs and building upon those relationships. And last is leveraging budgets and resources. As Caroline mentioned, with the CalEPA and Hazmat business plan transfer coming over to CalEPA, this is, looking at not only having these regulatory programs, but how can we leverage these new resources within our own organization to gain efficiencies. And this is both at the local and state level, and understanding that with emergencies that are occurring right now, resource strains at the local, state level, it's important that we all work together and coordinate as we move forward to ensure we have, that continuity of operations for the unified program throughout, all emergencies and just day-to-day activities. far as going into the CalEPA business plan program transfer, as Caroline mentioned, this is a priority right now. Is just really ensuring a seamless transition of programs. Just to highlight, and we had one staff person from OAS transfer over, and we currently have 3 vacancies within the CalEPA business plan programs that we are actively pursuing recruitment for and moving that forward and to support the transition of the programs. We're going to be setting up some public workshops probably the beginning of October. We were hoping for September, but with some of the ongoing emergencies, pulling resources, realistically looking at October. And here this will be open to local agencies, community groups. We want to hear, and industry, we want to hear from all of you on priorities within these 2 programs and kind of help us prioritize as we move forward. I know for many of you and industry, as we've discussed with SEEB and the industry tag, some of the priorities in the next few months before the end of the year is finalizing the spill reporting regs. We are working with Office of Emergency Services. They're still moving forward with that regulatory package, and the goal is to have that finalized by January 1, understanding that's impacting, proposed legislation. And also this is a big thing for not only the CUPAs, but industry. And so we're working closely with OES to ensure that continues to move forward. There's also been some draft refinery regulations focused on emergency response and notification for Program 4 within the CalEPA program, and along with updating the area plan. Those regulations are in draft. We'll be taking those probably over from OES and moving those forward and prioritizing, finalizing those regulations this next year. And then, of course, is updating the Title 19 regulations, just, clean up language with, for instance, substituting CalEPA's with CalEPA as part of that regulatory package. That just highlight these programs exist under John Elkins, who many of you know as our Emergency Management and Refinery Safety Program Manager. And with the emergencies, John and I are sharing the responsibilities of both transition of business plan programs and emergency response. But as Caroline mentioned, this is a priority for agency. We're committed to these programs, excited for the opportunity, and look forward to the partnership as we move forward. Some other updates from CalEPA Unified Program team is we're moving forward with updating Title 27. This is the administrative regulatory aspect of the Unified Program. And I just want to highlight here, this is another example of the great partnership of developing regulations with all of you and your staff. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from both state and local agencies on the process. They're moving through the articles right now and look to have this really completed and effective, hopefully by the third quarter in 2022. The group has gone through Articles 1 through 5 and are moving forward with Articles 6 through 10. Once these revisions are complete, the team will be holding some public workshops and then considering revisions after that point. But, out of this obviously is gaining clarity for all of you and us in the regulations. Also updating, as mentioned, the program SB 1082 was signed into law 28 years ago. And there's been some updates to the regulations over the years, but making sure that the regulations meet our current and future needs, not only for the program, but also just our implementation. Evaluations, this is always a hot topic amongst the local agencies. And when Caroline and I entered into CalEPA and our current roles, we had some challenges, but with all challenges, there's opportunities. And, those challenges, I felt like I was back at a rural agencies and lost all of our staff except for one person. And so with that, there was some backlog of evaluations, but now we are currently fully staffed within the evaluation team, and they're making great strides in working with the other state agencies who have had some staffing issues too, in getting update and getting caught up. And also, most importantly, improving our coordination and collaboration with the state agencies and the locals, as far as the whole evaluation process. But currently, there's 16 evaluations in progress. We have 8 more to initiate before the end of this calendar year. There's 26 CUPAs in progress reports. We've closed out this year 14 evaluations, and we have 16 more final summary of findings to issue from 2019. Again, highlight the accomplishments. There was, as I mentioned, the significant backlog, and so I'm proud of the team. There's a workload with these evaluations, not only to the state, but also to all of you, and adjusting our evaluation schedule over the last couple years and working with those local agencies that have been focused on recovery efforts from fires, impacts from COVID. The team has been flexible in adjusting that schedule, but also ensuring that we're moving forward and closing out the evaluations and ensuring that there's clarity in the process as we move forward, and assisting all of you. So just highlight some of the numbers here of where we're at and where we were. Last month, we reestablished the evaluation work group. The team did. Prior to COVID, we were looking at a hybrid evaluation process. COVID, had us pivot to a virtual offsite evaluation process, and it's really going well. I know we've updated how the CUPAs share information with the SharePoint site, which has been, we're using technology to improve our processes. I've heard, that's going much better. And then the work group is moving forward. We'll be meeting monthly. Goals from the work group is that collaboration moving forward and transparency of our process. And that is important, that all of you know how you're being evaluated, what the expectations are, and that we're working together through that process. Another goal of the work group is to review the charter and update it. Also update the evaluation manual to reflect the current remote process. Also ensure that the SIRS reports and report parameters to conduct the evaluations are shared with the CUPAs and have transparency through that process. And then also to revise the evaluation surveys so we get better input and feedback from all of you, so we can improve our process as we go from evaluation to evaluation. And that's an important aspect. And then last but not least is ensuring that we consolidate information requests, but also we recognize that over the last, couple years, there's been impacts to programs. And we can say that, these impacts outside of short staffing, but emergencies from responding to for wildfire recovery operations, COVID, have impacted continuity of program implementation, and ensure that we address that during the evaluation process, hear from all of you of what you've done to adjust, pivot, or what those impacts are, so we can work together to understand and also provide assistance moving forward. So this is, we talk about a lot of impacts to programs and shifting resources. Also, too, is how do we lean forward and assist those CUPAs that are not impacted from emergencies, but they lose key staff. They're a smaller agency, and not only provide assistance from local to local, which I know many of you do, but also from the state to local to support the continuity of program implementation as we move forward. So, you know, that's really, we had a meeting yesterday with an evaluation team and really posed that question to all the evaluators as we move forward, that we lean forward not just during the evaluation process, but when we hear of impacts to CUPAs outside of the evaluation process, that we make ourselves available to support program implementation as we move forward. CSRS, you know, sometimes this is a good 4-letter acronym, and other times maybe not so much from different perspectives. But it goes back, you know, CSRS has been around since, you know, the AB 2286 was signed into law in 2008 and went live in 2012. And I've experienced growing pains with CSRS, not only at the local level, but state level. But we have gained efficiencies, and also in our reporting structure. Businesses have gained efficiencies in their reporting structure. And so with this, we're excited to embark upon the CSRS Next Gen process, and address these current pain points and challenges. The system is almost 10 years old, and so we need that technology refresh. We need to make sure that the business needs and operations are aligned with the current system moving forward. There's hundreds of enhancements that are out there, and we're prioritizing those. And we all know there's data quality issues. And so with that, looking at, all improving and solving these issues with the CSRS Next Gen process. And again, it's the partnership between us and all of you to make sure that we understand the issues, the pain points, the challenges. So as we move forward with CSRS Next Gen, we're addressing those and constantly have that communication to improve the CSRS process. Priorities of CSRS, kind of hitting those pain points, replace the technology, make sure we comply with statutory and regulatory requirements, resolve pain points. The pain points are evolving, so we want to make sure that we're hitting those high points and that we're understanding new pain points as they arrive, I guess. Also prioritize and implement enhancement requests with all of you. And then this is really important. Design a solution that is scalable to future business needs, not only for industry, which we have 143,000 some users, but also for all of you. And I'll talk about this a little bit more as we discuss how the locals may be upgrading your data management system and how our future system can best meet the needs of integrating those new data management systems. And then make sure our business needs align with policies. And kind of to Linda's point, using our technology to make sure we're meeting our mission and vision and prioritize our work within the unified program. We need to have good data quality. We know we don't have that right now. And that's our priority moving forward. So we can, extract data, look at it from a way to strategize and where we need to put resources at both at the local level, state level as we move forward. So those detailed part of the CSRS Next Gen project activities is finalizing the detailed requirements. This is the system requirements that will be really help all of you with meeting the upgrade requirements with your local data management system, and we're expected to have those complete in January 2022. The data cleanup project will be kicking off, and that's a key project. Also, maintenance of the current system. We need to make sure that we are maintaining the existing systems. There's certain licenses other aspects of the current system that we need to upgrade. And we're currently working with a contractor to evaluate existing risks and prioritize solutions for those risks as we move forward to maintain the current system and move forward with CERS Next Gen. Also want to highlight that we are committed to the CERS Next Gen project and ensuring that we meet the timelines. And through that, there's a project governance structure. There's an advisory board that meets regularly as the project proceeds to assist the vendor and project efforts. And this advisory board also provides advice to the CERS Next Gen team. And then there's the executive committee, which is the decision-making body for the CERS Next Gen project. And the executive committee ensures the project is meeting its goals and is ultimately responsible for the project success. So, I'm proud of the team and the coordination collaboration between local, state government as where we're at with this project at this time, and have our full support from a management level as we move forward. Wanted to highlight here too, I mentioned this in the previous slide, coordinating local data management system upgrades. We've been working with some of you who have recently upgraded your local data management system. The timing of this is critical. And I say that because we have limited IT staff, and we need to make sure we're coordinated with all of you. So we don't have, a bunch of local system upgrades come 2025 when we're expected to go live with CERS Next Gen. That'll strain resources and may delay, all of you going live with your systems. So we need to make sure we're strategic as we work together, not with CERS Next Gen and upgrading your local data management systems, and have that coordination with the concurrent development. Oversight surcharge. This, as many of you know, went into effect July 1. This increase of a surcharge is $35, $8 to address structural deficit in the Unified Program Oversight, and $27 for the CERS Next Gen project. This $27 is stated to be assessed on the businesses for 4 years. And then at the end of that 4-year period, we'll adjust the surcharge to cover the cost of operation and maintenance for CERS Next Gen. And, I know this is hard, especially in the time of COVID, impacts to businesses. And we, Caroline, myself, and the team have coordinated with SEEB the iTag as we've, implemented and moved through the approval process with the surcharge and worked with the secretary. And we've also sent out notices in our newsletter. We have information on our website to answer questions from businesses or from the CUPAs. But we appreciate your support on this. Not only does it fund our part of the program, but also the CERS Next Gen project. And part of moving this project forward was ensuring Department of Finance that we had a stable funding source. Without the stable funding source, we might not have been able to move forward with the project. And where CERS is currently, we understanding the priority for CERS Next Gen and having the support of the business community and all of you is appreciated. But understanding that this is a tough time to be collecting an increased surcharge. And I know many of you receive a majority of the questions from your regulated committee as you collect these surcharges on our behalf. And I just want to take a pause and thank you and your team for doing that. Also, too, we've updated our transmittal report and instructions for CUPAs to include for the $27 for the CERS Next Gen project. So accomplishments, and I know Marjorie has an accomplishment slide coming up, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly here, but we have to take a pause because all the work that's being done is absolutely amazing. And I just, for instance, in the underground storage tank program, there were, in 2019, there were 2 only 2 new releases out of 37,000 underground storage tanks statewide. And I mean, I say that and it gives me chills because it's absolutely amazing. And the reason for that is all the work that's being done out there today by all of your staff, and ensuring that not only do we have good compliance, but we're enforcing and using formal enforcement when needed to ensure we have a level playing field and protecting the waters of the state. And I think that's an absolutely amazing statistic. And I know as we move forward with the sunset of single wall tanks and piping in 2025, we'll probably see a jump in those numbers just because of the nature of removing tanks and piping. But again, that's the next step to getting protective and equipment in the ground to better protect our groundwater. And I mentioned that as we're dealing with drought emergencies right now. And so just highlighting how all of that work segues into ensuring, safe and potable drinking water, especially for those sites that are near drinking water sources. Also, too, there's been a major reduction of incidents at high-risk facilities in the CalEPA program, and that's absolutely been, a tribute to the inspection enforcement program. We look forward to continuing that success that OES and all of you started, in looking at changes where changes need to be made within the CalEPA program, so we can look at certain facilities, look at the regulations and improve that to continue that success. And training is a big part of that too. Also statewide enforcement cases, coordination, collaboration, huge success over the years. Standard violation classification. We hear from industry quite a bit and on inconsistencies that may or may not be occurring, but we've come a long ways in standardizing our violation classification. Is there room to grow? Of course, but that's training and with our staff for all of your staff and working together to understand gaps and ensure training throughout the state. And I'll just end. We are proud to support the annual training conference that Cheryl and the CUPA Forum Board do an amazing job. And that training conference we look forward to every year. Unfortunately, it's been virtual, but understanding, we're still committed to support the annual training conference, and really how much of that conference reaches the local level and state level, and just the engagement by all is absolutely amazing. But that's an important part of the program, is training, of having that consistency and coordination. So with that, at this time, I will turn it over to Marjorie Terrell for the rest of the presentation, and thank you all.
Thanks, Jason. Good. So yep, I'm Marjorie, San Mateo County Environmental Health. I am the current CUPA Forum Board Chair, as well as one of the co-chairs of the training conference. Oh, there, my slides. Just quick, I think got a really good introduction at the beginning there. So that's sort of my background information about how long I've been with the program. I've been doing all the programs. So I was doing enforcement, waste hires. So lots of experience on the local level. Been with the Forum Board for a few years as well, moving through. So we're going over a quick overview of the CUPA Forum Board. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So if I go too quickly, please put some questions in. So we'll go over a brief overview of the Forum Board, the accomplishments, particularly the CUPA conference, both for 2021 and what we're planning for 2022, as well as what now for the CUPA Forum Board and what we're thinking of. So an overview of the CUPA Forum Board. This might be old news to some of you, but a refresher. We're basically broken into 4 regions: Northern Bay Area, Central and Southern. And about half of them are health departments. About 40 of them are fire departments. 6 are sort of these other environmental services agencies. They're not health departments, they're not fire departments. And then there's another 8 that are other various organizations. So we do draw from a broad spectrum of experiences. So the CUPA Forum Board, we elect members from each of the regions. There are 3 board members elected, as well as then 3 alternates. And then in addition to that, we have membership representation, a member from CCDEH, a member of the Fire Chiefs Association. The participating agencies also have representation to the CUPA Forum Board, and these are also voting positions. And then there's an e-board, which is the chair, a vice chair, a treasurer, and a secretary that are elected from the primary members. And it's a rotating transition through. So generally speaking, you come in as secretary, move to treasurer, move to vice chair, and then you move on into the chair position. So how the structure of the forum board meetings, I think Christine mentioned there are some questions about how that works. So the forum board meets 5 times a year. So all elected membership, regular members, alternates, as well as our other members, meet 5 times a year. August, December, and March, we are focusing on programmatic updates. October, we focus on legislation. So that one is coming up, and I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. And then in May, we focus on strategic planning for the next year. Again, this was all kind of thrown up in the air with COVID. We were still meeting regularly. We would typically meet in person. However, during COVID, we were meeting virtually, and recognizing that having 2 full days of virtual meetings would be a struggle. We kind of spread those out a little bit. And so we'd meet for just a few hours, maybe a couple times during the months we would typically meet. As well as strategic planning, all that kind of got thrown out, as well as we were dealing with the impacts of COVID and a little more of the emergency crisis mode. We are continuing to have regional meetings. Those occur every 2 to 3 months. So the CUPA Forum Board meetings are only for members and invited guests. The regional meetings are open to any CUPA and PA staff member. And in fact, we also occasionally have industry or vendor representation at those meetings. So they're also invited to join. We may have parts of those even regional meetings that are limited to regulators, in which point we would ask any outsiders to step, get off the call or step out of the room. But again, it is open. If you have staff who want to attend, it's not just CUPA managers, line staff, directors, everyone is welcome to attend those regional meetings. So sort of the main thing of what I guess is important for this presentation is it's how the CUPA Forum Board and CalEPA coordinate. This is what the CUPA Forum Board's main purpose is, I believe, and that is to have this coordination. We've got all these individual agencies, and then we have the state agency oversight of the programs. And if we're all talking to the state as individual CUPAs, it's a lot harder to get the message both up and down the chain. And so basically we have the structure of representation where local agencies, jurisdictions can send representation to the CUPA Forum Board through these regional meetings or through their elected Forum Board members. And then that Forum Board works with UPAG, the Unified Program Advisory Group. And we have meetings regularly as well. We can get information, we can share information with UPAG, and then that information get pushed down to the CUPAs. And we can also take that information to UPAG, which is where we've got the BDOs, CalEPA, and the Forum Board come together. That's where we have our strategic plan to decide what it is we want to do as a group. Coming off of the Forum Board, we then have our issue coordinators, and these are also CUPA Forum Board members. And these are our lead and technical experts in the various program areas. So you're looking at hazardous waste, business plan, CalARP, as well as we have some that are also environmental justice, evaluations. We get that information. Then there's the steering committees, which is also composed of CalEPA and BDO representation. So if it's more of a technical kind of thing or a very specific subject, we have that channel where the issue coordinators work with the steering committees on the programmatic type things that are not the larger picture. And then we have our technical advisory groups. The technical advisory groups are also similar to the regional meetings. They are open to CUPA staff. Anyone who's interested can attend the TAG meetings. Again, industry is welcome to attend with some caveats, being the fact that there are parts of the meetings that are just for regulators. We're talking about things enforcement. If there's any kind of legislative or anything that's confidential is discussed separately, and we'll split the meeting apart. But the technical advisory groups is also where we get, this is like the boots on the ground piece of it, making sure that the information is getting down to individual CUPAs. If there's issues CUPAs are having, where there's questions about interpretation, or they're seeing something new and they don't quite know what to do with it, they can bring it to the tag. The tag members can discuss it. Some of the tags are regional. There's like a Bay Area tag or Southern California tag or a Central tag. Some of the tags, there's just one tag for the entire state, and those tend to be done just by phone calls or Zoom meetings. But the issues come in, they can talk about them. If we realize we need some state guidance, we push it up to the issue coordinator. They go to the steering committee, they go to the forum board, it goes over to UPAG, or if there's things that are coming down the line, it can also filter down that way. If there's changes that are coming, new regulations, new interpretations, new findings, also evaluations, if things are coming up out of evaluations, we can push that down as well if it's program specific. And then we also, in this diagram, we've got tag strike teams. That's if we have a particular issue. I guess an example would be, recently we did the battery work group. So that came out of the business plan tag. There's a group of people working on a specific issue. Again, they take it back to the tag, it goes back up to the issue coordinators, either over to the steering committee or up to the forum board and over to UPAG. And then on the other side of that, you have the UPAG work groups, which is what you're going to have coming out of the strategic planning, where we've got our 5 goals. And so we'll be having work groups that are comprised of both CUPA forum board members. We're also pulling in some non-forum board members. So if there's something that interests you when you saw that strategic plan, or if you get a chance to look at a draft of it, if there's a particular topic that you have a staff member that you want to be involved in, let us know. So those work groups are open to members outside of just the forum board and CalEPA. Okay, so our accomplishments, what have we done recently? So first of all, overall, the CUPA program, as Jason mentioned, we've been around for a number of years, and we are the premier environmental regulatory program in the world. That is a little bit of tooting our own horn, but it's pretty much true from what we hear both across the country and even across the world. Every so often, we've had people from other countries express interest in the conference. And basically what is it? It's built this partnership, from the beginning, from the top state level, we've got the state regulations, all the way down to the local level implementing these programs. We're, consolidated, we've got the different disciplines, we're covering all sorts of different things, all with the same goal, the same mission. So again, over 26 years, I think Jason said it was 28 years in the program. Just to give you a sense of how big the CUPA program is and what we're doing. I know you guys, you have them within your jurisdictions, you know what we do, but across the state in fiscal year 18-19, we did over 104,000 inspections. The numbers are down 2021, because as you guys also know, we were tapped to do other things. So 90,000 inspections were conducted in the last fiscal year. That number might go up a little bit as all the quarterly reporting hasn't come in for the final quarter yet. But again, inspections were tapped to do other things. We were at shelter in place, but that's still a pretty good number of inspections. Businesses that were touched, we went out to make sure people were in compliance. And there's over 170,000 businesses that CUPAs across the state are regulating. Okay, so some things we did, some of these are a refresher from last year. Basically, we're still working with data validation with SIRS. AB 1429 was the HMVP certification, sort of simplified that for businesses, and that sort of demonstrates our partnership that we have with industry as well. We all have the same goal, and so it's not us against them. We're working with CalEPA, all the local levels, and then bringing industry in, right? We all want to work towards improving the environment for our communities, and if we work together, it goes a little easier. Same thing with the temporary emergency generator exemption that came out, I believe last year. We had battery guidance, and some things that were new in the more recently is the virtual modified inspection guidance during COVID. When we all kind of got shelter in place, we very quickly, the CUPA forum board with CalEPA had to convene and be like, hey, what are we going to do with inspections? We still have this inspection obligation. We don't want to be completely absent, but we want to make sure we're being safe, both in compliance with state orders as well as local guidance. So basically put out some very, preliminary guidance to CUPA inspectors, like, well, here's some things that are working, here's some things that'll be okay, here's what we need to make sure we're looking out for. And being able to work together and spread that across the state, so each CUPA wasn't trying to solve this problem on their own. And then one piece of legislation that we recently got passed, and now it's on the governor's desk waiting for his signature, is AB 480, and this is sort of this imminent threat, and that basically gives CUPAs the ability to shut down a facility if they're doing an activity that is immediately dangerous to the health of the community. So we worked really hard for a couple of years to get that one through, and it's finally made it to the governor's desk. Okay, so annual CUPA conference. So I think I know about this. I'm going to speed up a little bit to make sure we have time for questions. So I got our 2021 statistics for the CUPA conference. We had 5,000 attendees. It was a virtual conference, both government and business. It was our largest conference by far. Probably just over half of those attendees, I believe, attended our free industry session that we offer. We offered, I think, that 4 times during our 7-week conference. We had 50 students from 26 different colleges and universities. Again, we're trying to feed into the pipeline. We need to let people know about these careers, these opportunities, so we have staff that are ready to come into our when we have openings. And this is a plug, the video library. We recorded almost all of the sessions from the 2021 conference, and those videos are still available. So if you registered for the conference, you can still go back, same Event Power platform, and watch those sessions and get additional CEUs for the classes you view. And if you didn't register, you still can. We're still accepting registrations for the 2021 conference that will give you access to the video library. Okay, 2022 conference. We have finally decided, after going back and forth, as many of you are probably aware, we are going virtual again next year. We are only doing it for 2 weeks, however. So the conference will be the last 2 weeks of March, Tuesday through Thursday. We are currently looking for abstracts through the end of the month. So if you have any ideas for classes or know people who have ideas for classes, I would encourage you to submit an abstract at the CUPA website. And most of what we are looking for is to supplement the existing video library. We're only going to have 6 days of classes. We'll still have multiple tracks, multiple classes going each day, but we really want to supplement. We have really good video library of some classes, so we want to build on that. So we're looking to expand our class selection, maybe go more in depth into subjects, as well as providing updates, get some new topics in to supplement what we already have. Okay, what's next? So things we're looking at for the next year. These are kind of the priorities we've talked over with the executive committee of the CUPA Forum Board. Big one is training. Beyond the CUPA conference, it's making sure that we're meeting the training needs primarily of CUPAs. So training at the conference, training outside of the conference. Is it videos? Is it in-person training as we head that direction? We need to update our training matrix. We did that, I think it's been 2014 maybe, was the last time we did that. And make sure we've got classes so that when people can fulfill certain classes, and at the end, we know that they're trained in a certain aspect. So if they change CUPAs or if somebody wants to become a CUPA inspector, we actually have a training framework to help them achieve that goal. We're going to be working with CalEPA for the strategic plan implementation. So that is still an important goal of the CUPA Forum Board, to support those things and work with them. Legislation and regulatory changes. We are, as mentioned, October is when we start talking about that in earnest. And so if you have any things that you think need to be changed for legislation proposals, please get them up to the CUPA Forum Board. We'll discuss them, go back and forth. We do have a technical bill that we're hoping to get through this year that did not make it through this year. We're hoping to get it through next year. One of the big things about that is some changes to the retail definitions for business plan that we're looking to push through. Working with CalEPA on evaluations. I know there's a lot of hand-wringing and angst sometimes about those evaluations. So we want to continue to build that partnership, make it an open and transparent process so everybody knows what they need to do to have a good evaluation and there's no surprises. Again, working with CalEPA on SIRS Next Gen to make sure that it's meeting the needs of our businesses, as well as the CUPAs, as well as CalEPA. And then the other thing that we're going to try to do this year is reconnect with all the CUPAs. We want to make sure that we are actually meeting their needs. And so we'll be trying to figure out some ways to do that, to make sure the small CUPAs, the large CUPAs, rural CUPAs, urban CUPAs, all are able to give us information, and we're able to represent them going forward and fulfilling anything they might need. And with that, I think we'll turn it over to questions.
Well, thank you so much. That is really one of the most outstanding presentations and very, very thorough from all of you. I'm Justin. I'm with CCDEH and CAHA, and also serve as the advocate for the Cooper Forum Board on behalf of CAHA. And I just really, before we get to the Q&A, just wanted to use my privilege here of thanking Caroline, Linda, Jason, Marjorie, and of course, Christine, our very own Christine, so much for doing this. Really, it was an excellent presentation. I think those that aren't that familiar with the Cooper program got a fantastic snapshot of how impressive it really is. I can't believe it's 28 years. I think I'm one of the graybeards that was there battling the bill when it was first going through the legislature. And our concern was that if we had too many smaller PAs and smaller Coopers, we wouldn't be able to get the consistency. So I think we've done an outstanding job. I'm going to jump to the Q&As. We had one specific Q&A in the pipeline from Freddie at Vernon, and I'll get to that. And I also, I want to try and jump over some of the persistent niggling issues like the rural Cooper funding and the evaluation and even SIRS. And if I may get to a couple of really big issues. One is one that Linda raised, and that is how are we going to go about this risk-based inspection? To me, what you said, Linda, was music to my ears. We've been grappling for 20 years around this issue of how do we focus our collective energies on those areas, those communities, those facilities that need it most. And we've had various efforts through the Cooper Forum Board to do this sort of regulatory reform package. And it really hasn't been well received, partly from the EJ community because of the distrust or the lack of trust that we're not going to give actually more attention to the areas that need it. So I want to come back to that, but also to Caroline, you discussed the DTSC reform, you discussed the big wad of money, a lot of banknotes going to DTSC to help with cleanup. But I've got to say that in my 28 years, the locals have been cut short. We've got a very inadequate local oversight regulatory program. It's been difficult to get the locals to sign up to do oversight of these thousands and thousands and thousands of small sites, and many of them plague our communities. And DTSC, even with $500 million, isn't going to get to them. So it's a little bit of a loaded question, but for you, Caroline, my question is, how are we going to go about empowering locals to do more cleanup so that those very small sites actually get cleaned up? And to you, Linda, Linda, the question is, how would you see we go about developing a sort of more risk-based way of approaching enforcement and compliance? So let's start with Caroline, and then I'm going to get to the question from Freddie in Vernon about the area plans and whether CalEPA will provide a template for locals to facilitate updating the area plans. So Caroline, you're on the hot spot here.
Thank you, Justin, and I always appreciate a loaded question from you. So yeah, you bring extremely valid points, and I think there's two aspects to it. And I think the first is it is all about the money. In many cases, we would all like to be cleaning up sites, but they are expensive to do and do require, as you say, a lot of oversight. So within the $500 million for DTSC, there is $100 million, which is approximately, which is going to be set aside for a local grant program. So DTSC will be granting that money out to local entities, exactly as you say, to start to take care of some of these sites. We do appreciate that this is just a down payment on the scale of the work that needs to happen around the state. It's why it's critical that we demonstrate success and we build capacity in the program, both at the state level and at the local level, to investigate, to discover these sites, investigate these sites, find responsible parties where possible, and if there is no responsible party, to make sure we go ahead and clean them up. And as you know, we like to say, we're not growing any more land in California. And so as we continue to develop and as we're looking to meet our climate goals in terms of smart growth, these brownfield sites are really going to be critical to both transforming communities and also meeting our growth goals. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect, which is something that came up through the stakeholder process that we held for the reform was actually looking at who is the right entity to be doing oversight of different cleanup sites. And it's a question that gets very complicated very quickly. And I'm sure everyone on this webinar will have different versions and different opinions than a lot of the regulated community and developers. And so it's actually been specifically given as a statutory task to the board to start to take a look at this and to actually, in a public setting, have the conversation about who is the appropriate entity to be overseeing different cleanups at different places and what are the appropriate standards, where do we have duplication, where is there redundancy in the process, and where can we be better as we're looking at these cleanup sites. So again, that's really reflecting a lot of what we heard through the process, that the board, when they're in place next year, will be taking this on as one of their issues.
Thank you. That's a great response, and I think that it'll tee up the Cooper Farm Board and CCDEH's review of the quirk legislation and other efforts to improve at local oversight or oversight of cleanup in general. So Linda, how are we going to move ahead with risk-based inspections? Our food program is essentially a risk-based inspection program. We don't have statutory mandates on frequency of inspection. So each local environmental health department that has pretty much sole discretion over retail food will determine which facilities, which restaurants, which retail food facilities need to be inspected once or 4 times a year. And, I got to say, in general, it's working pretty well. But let's hear about how we should move ahead with optimizing our enforcement capacity.
So I think in areas, especially where there is discretion, that's exciting. That's an exciting opportunity. I think it can be frustrating where we have various statutory mandates, regulatory mandates, and our hands are tied, even if the sort of data tells us that that's not where our resources are needed most. So where there is complete discretion, I think that's our amazing opportunity to be incredibly strategic. And in thinking about it big picture, I think we approach it in at least two major buckets of inputs. One is looking at the communities that are particularly burdened. And I think CalEnviroScreen is a very good starting tool for helping us focus on the communities that need our attention the most. And then just going back to that image of the little kids looking into the baseball field, who's the shortest kid? So that's one important starting point in thinking about how we target our resources. And I think the other sort of big bucket is looking at the facilities and the highest and compliance history. And, who are the repeat violators who have over time shown a history of noncompliance, and how do we bring those two sorts of buckets of information together to help target our resources. So at the state level, I think we have useful models, with CalEnviroScreen obviously being an important starting point. But on the facility side, I think one example is DTSC's violation scoring procedure. And you look at the history of particular facilities, and then you come up with a score and sort of rank them into different levels of risk, and different rankings can trigger certain kind of inspection level, auditing level, additional requirements. Now, what you raised a really important point about some of these risk-based approaches not having EJ community buy-in. And I think that's where community engagement plays a key role in all of our work. Before we develop our clever algorithms are only as good as the inputs, right? And before we develop our clever algorithms, we need to listen to the affected communities and understand what factors we should be weighing heavily. There are all kinds of ways to manipulate the data, for lack of a better term. Are we looking at it over the last 4 years, 5 years, 10 years? What period are we looking at? What kinds of violations? So all of those inputs matter and can change the outcome of the algorithm. So coming up with an algorithm is not a magic solution. The algorithm can build in algorithms necessarily build in human bias. So that's why we have to be especially, and when I say bias, I mean, I don't mean sort of, ill will, but there are just natural biases that occur unintentionally. And so that's why it's so important to really engage at the outset with communities, affected communities who understand the burdens that they're suffering in a daily way that we as regulators don't necessarily understand, and to really have that community engagement process lead, because there's so much learning that we can all do from the community. And so developing a risk-based approach where there is a key community engagement component at the outset to help us understand what are the important inputs we should be including in a risk-based analysis. At the end of the day, we'll come up, all we can do is do the best we can in terms of having a really good process in developing such an approach. At the end of the day, there's going to be industry that's not going to like it. At the end of the day, there's going to be communities that are not going to like it. But that sort of good faith effort, that really important listening aspect, community workshops, pre-regulatory workshops, in order to really listen and understand, is I think, the process can make for a better product. And at the end of the day, some people are going to be unhappy, but if everyone is a little bit unhappy, then we probably did the right thing.
Thank you. That's a great response. And I can't answer for the Cooper Forum Board, but I know that within the Coopers, there's concern about actually cutting back on their permit fees if they reduce their frequency of inspection. And some industry, as you alluded to, I think, would assume that if we're going to inspect a 5-class facility less frequently, they may want to see a reduction in their permit fees. So it's a complicated issue, but thank you for addressing that. So I want to go back to Vernon's question. I want to prompt any other questions. We still got 5 or 6 minutes. So if anybody of those 50 participants have any questions, don't hold back. I know these people, well, they can take some heavy blows. That's why they're in the power seats that they are. Jason will take a blow and keep on smiling. You know what he's like. So don't hold back. Now's your chance to ask CalEPA those awkward questions that you wanted to ask. And let me throw that soft one in quickly while you prompt some questions here. And that is from Vernon. In the updated area plans, will there be a sort of template generated to help the locals update theirs? So I don't know if it sounds like a Jason issue.
Yeah, I can answer that, Justin. And thanks, Freddie, for the question. One of the things that we started working on this last year prior to even getting the programs was looking at ChemResponder, which is a pilot program, one as a first responder tool, and integrating our information and SIRS into ChemResponder, which is a FEMA supported product and part of RAD Responder, if you will. But I'm going to make this short because we're running out of time. So looking at, will ChemResponder, could it be used as an electronic area plan, having something that's more functional than a paper document that sits on a shelf, but something that can be used by the emergency responders planning aspects. And so we are currently, have the pilot project for ChemResponder as, incorporating the area plan regulatory requirements into that. If it doesn't work, Freddie, we can look at this as one of our, priorities or tasks moving forward, as developing a template for the area plan for local jurisdictions, but really hoping that the ChemResponder tool or hopefully will suffice those requirements and have it much more usable and nimble for all of us at the local, for all of you at the local level.
Thank you, Jason. And Freddie, you know where Jason lives, so if you need more information, fire off an email to him. I had one quick comment question for the CalEPA folks. I don't see any other Q&A, so I'm going to ask one more. I want to commend CalEPA and the administration for moving ahead on the budget play to transfer the CalOP OES functions over to CalEPA. This has been something that's been irking the locals for 27 of the 28 years, because frankly, to be blunt, OES hasn't done a great job in doing their regulatory part of the program. The response may have been stellar, but the regulatory part has always been, in our local perspective, a little lackluster. So we are hoping and are sure that CalEPA is going to do an awesome job in taking over some of those regulatory parts of that. Just wanted to really more of a question than, or a comment than a question, but like your response. Both the Cooper Forum Board, as you heard from Marjorie, and CCDEH work with fire, environmental health, and health. And as you look at those CalOP and as you look at those OES functions, we urge you not to forget the public health aspect, because we're all inextricably linked. And sometimes the public health side of environmental health or Cooper sort of get left out. The coordination with public health is critical. And as the legislation that we just worked on attests, AB 480 was originally a public health officer bill. It wasn't a Cooper bill. It was a bill aimed to give the local health officer the same authority that now 480 gives to the Cooper. And that's just a reflection of how integrated the Cooper, environmental health, and public health are. So anyway, I wanted to share that and see if you had any comments, and hopefully CalEPA in its new expanded role there will pull the family a little closer together.
Caroline, I can have a quick response. And you, yeah, Justin, I think, part of the integral part with the CalART program is there's some statutory requirements for OEHA. And I think there's a real opportunity as OEHA being a BDO under CalEPA to strengthen our coordination in looking at, the toxic endpoints, the threshold quantities, but most importantly, existing impacts, of different industries within the CalART program. How are they being regulated? And from a public health perspective, what can we be doing better, or what needs to be changed? And using the resources, and the information at both the local level and the state level to, prioritize, functions moving forward, and even with the business plan. And that's primarily emergency planning, community right to know, but look at and still having that public health lens. So that's my short answer to your question, but is and will be a priority as we move forward and working with all our partners.
Excellent. We have a minute left. I'm going to pass it over to Christine to wrap up or to have any last. And we did have one more Q&A. And I think, Linda, back to you on the risk-based and communication with the public. We would like to be part of that. The question really is, how best is it that we can get that confidence of the community that we work with, that we are serving, that we are protecting? How best can we give them that confidence that if we were to change these prescribed inspection frequencies to more of a risk-based that focuses on the need, that we can get their confidence? So I'm sure take a long time to answer, but if you've got any quick responses to that, to give us some assurance that we can work with you to get that confidence in the public and the community.
I think it's 2 words: relationship building. And it's 2 words, but it's a lot of work. It's really hard, but I think that's what it boils down to. Okay, thank you. Christine, anything else you want to add? We've got a minute left, so.
Well, my clock says that we're at 10:03. So I want to thank everyone again, all of our panel members, for being here today and sharing all of this important information. I don't know if Jeff has anything he'd like to say in closing. Otherwise, I think we're good.
I'd just like to thank all the panel members as well. That was a great presentation. Just to remind everyone that they, in order to get their CEUs, to go ahead and complete the evaluation. And then if you haven't signed up for future sessions, there is next week's session, the Solid Waste and Resource Recovery Committee presentation next week, so next Thursday the 16th. So looking forward to that as well. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day.